Hey everyone, this is Don with My Crypto Playground, and thanks for joining me on my channel. Today's video is going to be a replay of yesterday's Twitter Spaces with the Metropolis World team and Hugo Fillion, CEO of Flare Network, and they're just basically talking about interoperability and the partnership with Flare, and also what Metaverse world looks like with interoperability and connecting everything. Yesterday's space was hosted by the Metropolis World team with co-founders Rania and Rashid, and also their CTO Joby, and it's hosted by Jeff Athey, or Athey, I'm not sure. I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong. But anyway, for those of you guys that aren't familiar with Metropolis World, here's just a quick sneak peek into it. You can find it at metropolisworld.io. Now, the artwork on this is fabulous. This is the only Metaverse project I've invested in. And for those of you that know, Flare is one of its founding citizens. And let's scroll in and see the Flare building right here. You see that's it right there. Let's even scroll in some more. And you can see it right there. And what I'll do is I will click onto that. And let me just read a quick little description of the Flare building. The Flare building is a mythical and revered building within the city of Celeste. Its silver discs spin and whir eternally, performing modern day alchemy. Watch as their great ship, the Songbird, explores the blockchain, seeking new civilizations to trade with and bringing back fresh treasures to be transformed into data. These transformed beams of data are focused into the city to power our portals and cross-chain exchanges. If you catch the property at night with the perfect atmospheric conditions, it is quite the light show. Now, I can go into it more in depth in another video with Metropolis World, but I just wanted to give you guys a brief overview. For those of you that haven't seen it, you probably heard about the partnership with Flare and Metropolis World. So anyway, you guys strap in. This is a long video. So yeah, hope you enjoy, and then I will see you guys on the next video.
Hello,
Thanks.
everybody, and welcome to another week of our Metropolis World Talks, where we are discussing any and everything it takes to build and operate a capital city in the metaverse. Today, I am joined by our very special guests. From our own team, I am joined by both of our co-founders, Rania and Rashid Ajami, as well as our CTO, Joby. Rashid, would you like to say hello? Do you have any special announcements before I get to our guests for the day?
Really excited to be here. Very excited for this space. No major announcements. I'll try maybe at the end to drop a few bits of alpha around what we're working on, but looking forward to this conversation.
All right, sounds good. Then I think it's about time that we go ahead and jump on into it. So today we are joined by a very special guest, Flare Network, who is one of our founding citizens in our Genesis city of Celeste. Now, Flare Network, for anyone who might be unfamiliar, is an EVM-based Layer 1 blockchain that gives developers decentralized access to high-integrity data from other chains and the internet. So this basically enables the use of enables new use cases and monetization models while allowing apps to serve multiple chains through single deployment. Now, from Flare Network, we are lucky enough to be joined by their co-founder and CEO, Hugo Fillion. Hugo, thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing today?
Hey, I'm great, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Now, just to get us started off, would you be able to give us like a general high-level overview of Flare, just in your own words? I would love to hear how you describe it to people.
Absolutely. So if you think about layer ones, you think about things like Ethereum, Avalanche, Cosmos, Bitcoin, XRP. These are isolated ledgers. They're really good at coming to consensus, or in some cases, like Solana, less good at coming to consensus over what has happened on the chain. This is, of course, a perfectly acceptable model of blockchain. Flare, however, is a layer one, EVM powered, so uses the same smart contract language as the Ethereum network blockchain. So it's a layer one blockchain. And it has two additional protocols that make it, we think, an interesting and useful addition to what's going on in blockchain. And those two protocols allow, essentially in brief, allow data from outside of the network to come to the network in a secure and decentralized manner, and they're secured directly by the network itself rather than some application that sits on top of the network and has lower security, or in many cases are basically centralized. So Flare has two protocols, the first being what we call the Flare time series oracle. This is for what we call time series data. So this is data that essentially moves over time. Probabilistic data, i.e. where there isn't one single source of truth. To give you an example, we currently collect prices of various crypto assets at 3-minute intervals. Those assets don't necessarily have a single source of truth because there's many different exchanges that trade them. So it's very hard to come to consensus over what that truth is, and so you have to have a weighting methodology. So that's the FTSO, and it's good for things like prices, indices, carbon emissions data, really anything that is probabilistic and moves over time and maybe doesn't have a single source of truth. Then we have a second protocol called the state connector, which allows Flare to come to consensus over immutable blockchain data. So what has happened on another chain? A transaction has happened on another chain. We can prove that onto Flare. And once that is proven onto Flare, that can be used in a smart contract to, say, trigger some action. We demonstrated this yesterday with being able to buy an NFT on our Canary network, Songbird, directly with Doge and XRP. So an NFT that was minted on Songbird was bought in the native currency on the native ledger. So on Doge, one XRP was sold using Doge, one NFT was sold using Doge, one NFT was sold using XRP. So this is the sort of second of our protocols called the state connector. And then lastly, a specific setting of the state connector allows Flare to come to consensus over Web 2 data. So what we call a single source of truth API. So this might be the Twitter API, this might be the Facebook API, although I think that's closed, meaning closed source, we can't access it. But there's many hundreds, thousands, millions of APIs on the internet that potentially are open and the network can come to consensus to. This allows much more interesting applications to be built than perhaps currently can be built. So that's the sort of high-level overview.
Yeah, that was amazing. Thank you so much. There's tons of really exciting information in there that I'm really looking forward to digging into over our time together. For anyone who might be listening in, a lot of the topics that we're going to be going into today have a higher level overview in terms of the future of Web3 technologies, where Web3 might be lacking, as well as the concept of interoperability within Web3 and Metaverse worlds as a whole, particularly as it intersects with new cities, environments, and ecosystems like Metropolis world. And I think like a really exciting point for a lot of people who are entering this space, particularly those who are getting frustrated with the way that Web 2 might be operating itself right now, is this concept of interoperability within the metaverse. For someone who might be new to this conversation, would you also be able to give us like a high level idea of what interoperability means to you, why it's important?
In brief, if you want to think about interoperability in Web3 and you want to think about interoperability between Web 2 and Web 3, you have essentially what a blockchain is: a computational system that updates a ledger with a new state periodically when a transaction is made. We may think that transaction is maybe minting an NFT or transferring an NFT or putting an NFT in a smart contract perhaps to borrow against it. The problem is that data isn't really available anywhere other than that blockchain. Same with your tweets. It's that when you make a tweet and you use a specific hashtag, no blockchain can know what's really happening on Twitter. You can use some sort of basic Oracle solution that can deliver you a centralized version of that. What we're trying to achieve is essentially being able to unify all the data, which then ultimately over time allows all the assets to be unified, such that your NFT doesn't have to exist solely on one platform. It can exist on multiple platforms, different times, depending on where you need it. So if you have a game or an application that you want to use on various different platforms, you can move that NFT over. And whilst that's not something we're directly building today, it is something that Flare makes.
Yeah, and that is super attractive for a lot of people coming into this space, particularly those who are super interested in Web3, metaverse, and gaming, because it allows you to expand your avenue in ways that you never would have been able to do otherwise. Because currently, the way that things are set up, say, I'm a gamer, for example, and I love playing video games. I love diversifying the kinds of games that I play, but sometimes it can be difficult to delve into a new game, particularly if it's like an MMO or something that might take a lot of time or money to invest in, because the assets that you are earning in that particular world of that game are only going to be utilized within that particular world. However, all of these interoperable assets will allow us to connect these worlds so that you can travel between them. And it really opens up the metaverse and creates an entirely new universe that never would have been possible.
Totally. Your assets are simply represented as data somewhere. It applies equally to arbitrary data, not just NFTs. But I completely agree that being able to utilize things you've either worked hard for or paid a lot for across multiple platforms is an extremely desirable thing.
Yeah, for sure. And at Metropolis World, interoperability was one of the things that we first came across when we were trying to think about what we wanted this first capital city to become. We really wanted it to be a kind of gateway to other worlds. And it helps in a lot of different ways, both in terms of like business development, but also in terms of just accessibility to other platforms, building partners, making friends in this space. Joby, I'm wondering if you might be able to speak to some of the like dreams and ideals that we are dreaming with Metropolis World when it comes to being an interoperative ecosystem with other platforms, games, communities, that kind of thing.
Yeah, for me, I think it's twofold. There is one element which is it should be up to the user which chain they want to use. It shouldn't be determined by any project that says, oh, you must be on Ethereum, you must be on Doge, you must be on Flare, you must be on any of the other ones. That shouldn't be the case. It should be up to the user and they should all work. And if the user wants to move all their NFTs onto Doge for some reason, then they can. And it should still work and it should still be completely fine. And then the other element to it is, like you said, is like, wouldn't it be cool if you could take my Mario character and play it in Sonic, or take my Sonic character and play it in Mario? Like all those characters, all these people that you've created and spent time and money on developing and enhancing, and as will be the case with Metropolis World, we've spent lots of time buying different clothing items for your avatar, accessories, all of these sorts of things, and you've made a beautiful avatar. Why shouldn't you be able to use that in any game you choose? You should be able to play it in Fortnite. You should be able to stick it into Roblox or Minecraft or Decentraland or Sandbox or any other thing. So, like big vision-wise, that it should all work everywhere with everything. And then what happens is we get these group of kind of super assets, which are developed and have IP which is related to a specific company, but those super assets can play in all sorts of places, and game developers just make cool games and they don't need to worry about the characters because everyone brings their own character, and it changes the whole way of the whole ecosystem of gaming and puts a whole new spin on it. It makes it much more like when you go and play sport, for example. You don't turn up at the football pitch and change your body for a football body. You just play. You take the body with you, and the game's there.
I wish I could.
So it should be the same. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but that's the idea, right? You know, maybe in the future we will have robot bodies where we can switch to the football body and then the rock climbing body and the surfing body. But right now, it's the other way around.
That's the ultimate dream. That's what we're going for. Is just to make robot surfing bodies. That's Joby's ultimate. That's Joby tells me that every single day. And even going further from that, this is just largely how we're trying to build like a digital city and a digital world that is similar to how the real world operates. And I think one of the most common questions that we get asked at Metropolis World, particularly as it relates to interoperability or how interoperability helps us, is who are your competitors in this space? And that has opened up an entirely new realm of possibilities for us to actually further our development of Metropolis World and this city, because ultimately we can look at the concept of creating an open metaverse by saying we don't necessarily have competitors, we just have more future partners that we could work with, that could be in our city, that we could be in theirs. And Rashid, I know we've all kind of made a lot of businesses on our own, but how has that concept of being able to just become partners instead of competitors with everyone changed how we go about like bringing new people into this ecosystem and connecting everything?
Absolutely. What really excites me about what you're building, Hugo and Flair, is that this is really a dream for someone like me as a non-technical founder, where I'm constantly annoying Jobby about how can we build this partnership? How can we integrate into this community? How can we bridge this even just to Web 2? How can I launch a physical store in the real world, something I'm looking to do where you buy an NFT chip in a t-shirt and then you redeem the virtual for your avatar, and then that can be utilized in our ecosystem and so on. Because for me, partnerships is so integral to this, especially when building a city which is essentially made up of multiple communities, and you want a city to be a bustling hub of many different activities, entertainment, content, IPs all coming together. So I think that's what makes me really excited about what you're doing, because I think a lot of people talk about interoperability and they're not really, it's just a buzzword they use, but what you guys are doing is really bringing that to reality, which I find very exciting, at least from the Metropolis world standpoint.
I think you may be bugging Joby, but imagine trying to build Web 2 where you're trying to build an application, let's say Facebook, right? But you also had to build the bit of the internet underneath you, and then also build all the pipes to everything else. We're still in terms of being able to work with all the other chains, all the other assets, we're still at an incredibly nascent stage. There is no single protocol. We obviously would like Flare to be one of the major protocols for interoperability. That's what we're working towards, to try and enable developers really to focus on their business rather than the pipes and the stuff underneath the pavement.
Yeah, could you go into that even a little bit further? What is it that Flare allows people to do that they wouldn't necessarily be, or they might be lacking, or they may not be able to do without Flare?
So Flare lets you run a smart contract, which can essentially gather data from any chain, right? That's any chain it's connected to, and it's not hard to connect a new chain to Flare. So that's the first thing. So you can reference essentially any address, any state from any other chain. Can also bring in certain data from the internet. That's the first part. Then on top of that, we're urging developers to build more specific interoperability applications, such as bridges, direct bridges between chains. And we've laid out a number of protocols in that space, which we're very excited about and looking forward to seeing come to fruition. And then there's things like relay protocols. But ultimately, we want Flare to be the center of a set of protocols built by developers, which allows an application to essentially do everything it needs to do across all the chains.
Yeah, for sure. And so in a similar vein to that, could you explain a little bit more of, I suppose, like what traits or aspects of a particular, let's say, project, business, metaverse world, or just general use cases for Flare? What aspects or traits are you looking for when you're looking at those people to work with, or work with people who might be able to utilize this technology? What are those like key signs?
Ultimately, we want to make this as easy as possible for, take a metaverse, right? Metaverse is very focused on building its virtual environment. It's less focused on building interoperability across chains. So ultimately, we encourage developers who are building interoperability protocols powered by Flare to make this as easy as possible, make a good API endpoint, and make it incredibly easy to use. But then there's some very specific protocols. So for instance, if you look at bridges for value, whether it's an NFT or whether you look at bridges for, say, tokens, non-fungible tokens, you have certain constraints there. We've put forward bridging methodology called Layer Cake that adds insurance and makes bridging virtually instant. Why is this useful? If you're transferring a very large NFT, very expensive NFT, you really don't want that to get lost. You really don't want that to get stolen in transit. You really don't want the signers of the bridge to essentially have an issue, which is what has happened in so many bridging exploits. With Flare, we've been thinking very hard, very deeply for a very long time about, okay, so how do you do this in a sensible way? So to give you an example, the state connector comes to consensus over state on other chains, but it's not just guaranteed by proof of stake, because proof of stake, when you come to cross-chain aspects, has a real fundamental flaw. Fundamental flaw is that the stake in a proof of stake chain that is handling cross-chain aspects must be 3 times higher than the value it secures. If it falls below 3 times higher than the value it secures, you have a problem. You have a safety problem. This is a major issue. The state connector doesn't just rely on proof of stake. It then has a secondary protocol that gives it additional security, such that we say it is invariant to the value being bridged across chains. So this is sort of an example of our thinking. When we look to partner with people, we look to partner with people with essentially similar viewpoints of ours. They want to build best-in-class products. So for Flare, we're looking at building our own internal layer one ecosystem, such that there are applications on Flare that just use Flare, but also applications which we call interoperability applications that are leveraging Flare in order to create safe interoperability.
Yeah, that was amazing. Thank you. And Joby, would you be able to explain some of the value in some of these bridges, particularly when it comes to Metropolis World's vision, particularly as it relates to something like bridging a blockchain or utilizing some of these technologies in order to like create these visions? Where is that value for us from like a theoretical standpoint?
The value is really about choice, isn't it? The value is about choice. It's about offering the user choice. So the thing about Ethereum, for example, is it's super secure, or it's maybe less secure now, but it used to be very secure. And it's one of the big daddies. It's one that everyone's heard of, and it has this perception of a lot of value stored there, which there is. And so that's great if you want to have valuable assets. That makes a lot of sense. But as we found out as a company and as an industry, the Ethereum gas cost is spiraling and onerous and makes transactions, particularly small transactions, infeasible. And so then you start to think, okay, maybe we should look at Polygon or Solana or one of the many other alternatives out there that have quicker transaction speeds and lower transaction costs and can move things very quickly for low cost, but then maybe don't necessarily have the same perceived value or the same security behind it. And so you then end up with this kind of imperfect hybrid system where you're trying to get the best of both worlds. You want low cost, you want low gas, but you also want to preserve and protect everyone's valuable assets, which all of which are important goals to achieve. So what you can do when you have protocols such as the ones on Flare, you can move things around and have the best of all worlds. You can move it to a low-cost chain when you're playing a game and you need to do loads of transactions and move in and out and change stuff. And then once you've done, you can move it back to somewhere like Ethereum, and then you can sell it and maximize your value, for example. So I think that from the highest level, that's what it's all about. It's about choice and then moving around freely and using the best of all the chains for what the user wants to achieve.
Or you could move it to Flare and you could sell it in any currency simultaneously. What we did,
which is huge.
What we did yesterday is we enabled a Doge transaction to purchase an NFT on our Canary net. We enabled an XRP transaction to purchase an NFT on our Canary net. These are transactions happening on those chains. So essentially, a user can come to Songbird. They can, say, "I'd like to buy this NFT." They can choose the chain they want to buy, the currency they want to buy it in, whether that's Doge, XRP, connected to the network. And they can then make that transaction on the underlying chain. That can be proven on Flare. The NFT can be released on them. That gives you the largest possible purchasing power for which to sell your NFT to. So rather than being restricted to, say, Ethereum, where you're basically either buying in ETH or, I assume, sometimes in stable coins, but usually in ETH, you can now sell your NFT simultaneously in every currency, giving you the largest market possible, which I assume is a good thing.
It absolutely, just again, coming from the perspective of a founder of a project building, it's so critical because we're always conflicted on these decisions of what chain should we be on and what's the best solution. And every single chain has its own nuance, its own community, and we want to be accessible to the largest possible audience and provide that choice. So I really think that's the critical next step and evolution.
At the moment, Ethereum for NFTs is basically like the dollar. You want to buy oil at the moment until, I assume, relatively soon. Oil is priced in dollars and you have to settle that trade in US dollars. And that's the Ethereum ETH's role in NFTs. What we want to do is break open that role and allow essentially oil, an NFT, to be priced simultaneously in every cryptocurrency.
Yeah, that's amazing. And that really allows, it just allows that flexibility to expand also just the applications. Because for us now, we're looking, okay, I'll give some alpha for this, but we're looking at a play to earn game that we're launching around one of our NFT collections that we've recently airdropped to our users, and how those actually enter into the gaming environment. And it's just not really sustainable on Ethereum to do certain things like that. So whilst we have the core asset is living on Ethereum, and that's great from the perspective of just NFT ownership and the value, as you said, it's almost like my analogy is that it's like the Apple Store of NFTs. It's being on Ethereum. The moment you want to start introducing utility and flexibility, it becomes extremely limiting very quickly.
But to a certain extent, if you think about it, staking on Ethereum is suppressing the price of NFTs. Because if you want to buy an NFT, you have to essentially say, this NFT is going to perform, if you're price orientated, which I know that many people are and many people aren't. If you want to buy an NFT, that NFT has to perform better than the staking. This allows you to buy it in a stablecoin. Flare allows you to buy it in a stablecoin. Flare allows you to buy it in something like Bitcoin, of which has a different rate in which you can lend it into the market and all that kind of stuff. This is the utility of what we're doing. It equalizes the playing field for all the tokens.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so just on that note, I know Rashid dropped a little bit of alpha in regards to a play-to-earn game that we're developing, but ultimately the goal is to build a thriving, functioning digital city with all the functionality of a real one. There are things like gaming and e-commerce, but there are like classes, and there are so many different ways that people can actually live and thrive within like a digital city, and it takes so many different things to actually make it work. Hugo, I was wondering if you might be able to speak to, we already talked a little bit about how that kind of helps in regards to gaming, but what other areas of like Web3 might be underutilizing the current technology that's available to them?
Do you mean in terms of interoperability?
Yeah, primarily.
The biggest thing is that you might have the same asset trading on different dexes, on different chains, at different prices with different yields, right? So this would be like having a dollar that sits in Japan and a dollar that sits in the US, having completely different financial characteristics. Ultimately, markets, humans find a way to unify those characteristics if they're the same asset. This is what interoperability gives you, and this is what we don't have. So that's like the biggest use case for strong, safe, secure, fast interoperability is a financial harmonization across ecosystems.
In what areas do you think we might be lacking specifically in terms of interoperability for various metaverse worlds? Are there metaverse worlds that you've seen that are truly interoperable, or are a lot of things just still lacking and could be improved with the use of various technologies?
I guess metaverse worlds are all individual, right? If you look at some of the metaverse worlds, maybe I don't know, pick one like Decentraland or Sandbox or whatever. I think that primarily the assets in those worlds generally originate from one chain. That's great, but that only gives them a certain set of customers. If that chain ceases to be the most popular chain, how quickly do they have to shift? Are they able to shift? Are they able to grab a new market? I think any metaverse world should be multi-chain from the get-go. Its assets should exist or be capable of existing across essentially as many systems as possible.
Yeah, for sure. And as we're kind of building a lot of these things and connecting everything together, I think it's also interesting to talk about how a lot of these worlds act with people's everyday lives. We'll say either the physical world or platforms that they're already using. And I'm wondering if you have any ideas on how Web3 technology might interact or become important in like physical day-to-day life as they're going about, or do you see this as a purely within the digital realm? Oh, I might have lost someone there.
Oh, sorry,
Oh,
I cut out for a sec. It depends what you're characterizing as the digital realm. We say that Facebook is the digital realm, Instagram is the digital realm, but the reality is this is now part of everyone's day-to-day lives. And I think that there's a lot of things that can be done with things like Twitter, especially with its extremely large crypto presence, that can be made much more integral to our experience of things like metaverses, or I never know whether it's metaverses or metavibe, but anyway. And that's the first area, I think, is combining metaverses with social media, whether that's decentralized social media, and hopefully those kind of protocols like Lens Protocol become highly successful, or centralized social media. And it looks to me that's fairly likely to be here to stay for a while. We're currently talking on Twitter, for example.
yeah, for sure. And one thing that you said I kind of want to highlight, there's what is like the physical world or the quote unquote real world and what is the digital world is just becoming more and more blurred every day. So it's really difficult to figure out what is the most impactful part of everyone's life because we spend so much time and energy on these platforms. And I think of just a simple example of if I go to my local deli and I pay using my phone, is that part of my digital life because all of those assets are on my phone? Is it part of my real physical life? And how do all of those assets intermingle within the digital world? Rashid, I was wondering if you might be able to speak to some of our dreams and how a metaverse might interact with people's everyday lives. Like how do we see that kind of developing in the future?
Yeah, totally. We've identified four pillars that kind of make up the ecosystem we're trying to build at the moment, which is social, commerce, metaverse, and gaming. And the two pieces that we feel are really important that we're emphasizing now is social and commerce. Commerce being that we have a lot of brands very interested to enter the metaverse through us. One of our mission statements is we want to be a gateway to the metaverse. These brands are really driven by physical commerce, e-commerce, and we're looking at how do you integrate that into our world. How do you, for example, say that you walk into the Supreme, which is always my favorite example, Supreme, but you walk into a Supreme shop, you buy the Supreme t-shirt, that allows you to redeem the virtual version of that you can then utilize in Metropolis. But then we're also doing it the other way around, where you purchase the Metropolis sunglasses virtually, that redeems the physical one that's delivered to your home. And then that in itself just opens up this whole process of how that direct to consumer funnel works. The second is on social. So, this AMA, as you said, Hugo, like we're doing it on Twitter. We've identified that our users really want to develop out their properties. They've bought these properties in the world that have started as dynamic NFTs. Now we're building this utility, and we wanted to learn what the community wants to use the property for. And we realized one of the things is to build their own environment where they can host events, they can host AMAs, they can host workshops, they can sell their products. And we're looking at how do you integrate that type of functionality into the virtual realm in a really seamless way. When you start to do this, it's quite daunting. So I only imagine how daunting building Flare is, which is just so much more complicated, and you're just always in new territories. And
But
I
for
don't know if you
me,
sleep, but
very rarely. But for me, it's the merging of all this, right? It's like, so how much does Metropolis use Twitter? Yes, you do. But how much are you integrating that into Metropolis? Is there a, how does all these technologies get used so you have a more seamless experience? One of the great things Apple has done is put your credit card on your phone. It makes the whole experience of paying for things so much more seamless, and that's why they're completely winning the payment war over everyone, and they'll end up owning all of our health data and all of our payment data and all that kind of stuff. That's not necessarily a good thing. Let's not beat around the bush on that one. It's a question of, how do you leverage Twitter within Metropolis, given it's basically where at least I'd say 80 to 90% of your users probably have an address, right? It's things like, and you're talking about sales pipelines and things like that. One of the things we're thinking about is what would an MVP of monetizing Twitter on a blockchain look like? It might be that you could use the state connector to attest a tweet that has a hashtag about something in Metropolis, and you can create a campaign to essentially grassroots people to advertise that by giving them a micropayment on a blockchain. on Flare attested with the proof that they made that tweet and how many likes and how many retweets that happen attested to Flare, such that a small amount of, say, coin gets delivered to that person's address on Flare. So how do we merge these things together? How do we make it seamless? How do we make it part of one cohesive experience? That is what interests me.
Exactly. And that's interesting because there's two elements for us which we're currently looking at from the earn perspective, which we really believe in creator economy, and there's play to earn, engage to earn, and then create to earn. For us, engage to earn really just ties directly into the use case you just gave. Another is if you create assets for us, which we see a lot of our users expanding on our IP, and we want that. We want to reward them for that. We want there to be a clear way to trace that and have people eventually make a living from just expanding and from creativity and from engaging and from playing. And so that's really, if you're solving those things and looking at those things, I think that's where this has to go, because that's the whole premise of Web3 to me, is that ability to allow that communities to come together and build a product in that way.
Like we know today that it is a worse experience than using Web 2, but people have adopted it because it's useful. We need to make it more useful and a better experience.
Yes, totally. And we've seen that. We're now in conversation with a lot of really exciting brands that are just very new to the space, and they want a very tangible approach in how to enter it. And that's why we've really started with this Web 2.5 approach before building in 3D. And I know sometimes our users get impatient and like, when is this 3D coming? But we just looking at many of these metaverses, I don't want to name names, but they're very sterile environments where they lack the true utility that people actually want, and the things that people really want to do that ties back to their real world or their digital world, their social world. So it's the same with these brands. You want a tangible entry point, a way to do this seamlessly. And whilst Apple has its negatives and how centralized it is, they are seamless. And we always look like, how do you create a seamless experience? And I think that's really critical to the growth of this space.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, sorry. Don't mean to interrupt you, Hugo. On that note, what I kind of want to highlight something that both of y'all were talking about. Hugo, you mentioned that this kind of notion of people utilize Web 2 and are on Web 2 platforms, knowing that it's not the ideal experience, but we still use it anyway. And I think back to a lot of conversations that I have with friends that are solely Web 2 based and are constantly complaining about the platforms that they're using or problems that they might have in regards to their information being utilized or their assets being taken without their knowing. What are some particular cases that we might highlight in regards to the problems that are currently present in Web 2 that Web 3 could fix? Like, how do you open up that conversation with individuals who may not be as familiar with Web3 as a space or Web3 as it's getting developed? What are those like introductory problems to highlight for the Web2 people?
Everyone's had that. I think most people have had that experience where they've had a conversation with a friend in real life. And they've mentioned, let's say, a destination they might want to go one day. And then they've gone back to their phone and they get adverts for that destination. And that's because everything you do and say with all of your devices is being tracked and monetized and sold to someone else. And there's been, first of all, Web3, it does allow tracking to an extent, but it's very limited to what they can see. So they can observe that a token goes from one address to another. That's the limit of it. But it's a question of also being more honest with people's data and being more open that, either I'm doing this with your data, like it or don't, and pretty much nothing you use on the internet is open or honest about that, or B, allowing a user to opt in. So that's a good introductory conversation to saying, if you're not wholly on board with every aspect of your life being monitored and sold to the highest bidder, perhaps you might have a look at Web3.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that are really focused on and really thinking about a lot is this notion of, I think when I have that conversation with people, the conversation then steers into a point of, I don't necessarily have a lot of friends that are utilizing Web3 on those platforms. And the digital space is such like an interconnected web of individuals. So I suppose, how would you address the notion of bringing more people to these platforms, to utilizing Web3 technologies? Like, is it just like a matter of getting the message out there, or is it
No,
something?
no, it's a technical advancement. Right now, the address and signature mechanisms and the way you sign transactions to do things are an absolute nightmare. If you handle large amounts of crypto, you'll be familiar with something like a ledger or a Trezor. If you've ever signed a transaction on a ledger or a Trezor, you'll know that basically 9 times out of 10, what on that device is absolutely gobbledygook. Meaning, you as the general user, you cannot actually determine what it is you're signing when you're signing directly on that device. We need a number of things. One is we need clear signing, and we need that to be a standard that is implemented widely so that in the first case, people know what they're signing. But then, much more importantly, we need account abstraction. And this is something that there's lots of people working on account abstraction. It's quite hard, but essentially allows you to control essentially allows you to use an address without having to hold the private key, and you can use, say, a standard login.
So do you see, I suppose, in the future development of Web3, do you see like more traditional Web2 companies or environments, ecosystems, like we're on Twitter, so I'll use that as an example. Do you see like the future of Web3 being like those more traditional Web2 companies transitioning into Web3, or is it an entirely new voice coming to the table that needs to happen?
I think it'll be a combination of both, right? So I think there'll be entirely new companies built in Web3, such as yours, and then perhaps more forward-thinking Web2 companies that build a presence and actually become large there. I put more weight on the former than the latter. I think it's unlikely that the Googles and the Facebooks and the Instagrams of this world are not going to have some meaningful presence in Web3 over the long term.
I have to agree. And one interesting use case that we've been seeing a lot with companies we speak to, again, mainly brands, is this idea of utilizing a space like Metropolis World to create virtual products and test and learn and iterate and develop before taking it to the physical. And one is because you have this amazing feedback loop in Web3. You have communities that are highly engaged, you have instant feedback, and you have this ability to really tap into an audience and understand a product before you take it to market. And that was a conversation I had with a really top exec who was at Google and WPP, and it was a very interesting kind of use case I feel that I could see happening in terms of product testing, innovation. There's an opportunity I feel with that specifically in terms of companies entering the space.
Yeah, and I think just to add to that, I think it's all about, like Hugo, you were saying, it's all about making it easy. It's a pain in the ass, really. Most of what we have to do in crypto just to move a few coins here and there, you have to jump through a whole bunch of hoops. Whereas in the Web2 world, it's so much more developed that most things are relatively simple. And if you forget your password, there's a simple mechanism to get a new one, etc., etc. And I think the firms that race ahead in the Web3 space are those that kind of crack that usability. The actual Web3 crypto technology disappears into the background and isn't noticed.
Yeah, look at stablecoins, right? They offer something that you simply can't get in the traditional banking system, which is the ability to make a payment in minutes. And for that, the hurdle of the technology is you have a strong incentive to overcome that hurdle.
100. It's nowadays it's impossible to even set up a bank account, let alone do transactions. So I think that's really a compelling use case in itself.
And as you've seen with Twitter, the censorship from the wider powers that be has led to Elon Musk doing this massive kind of takeover and a whole new world. And ultimately, that's going to get that kind of regressive scenario is likely to get worse and worse for Web2 companies. And that's where I really think that they'll actually end up embracing Web3.
Yeah, and I think on that note, a lot of what we've been talking about is the use of this technology, particularly as it comes from transferring like monetary assets. But as we've been talking about with Twitter again, as this kind of example, is that our assets, particularly those within the digital world, are much more than just like monetary assets. It's our information, it's our livelihoods, it's like our personality and our identity. All of these things exist on various assets within the digital space. And so, like, how do those assets build within the digital world? Like, how do we keep those safe in regards to as we're creating these new platforms?
I think privacy protocols is a huge area of research. They're not cracked yet. We all know about zero knowledge proofs, but are very limited. They give very limited utility right now, but we're still early in this field, and there's still huge areas of research that need to be done, and really quite deep mathematical engineering research to figure out, okay, so how do we let people transact with each other such that they are protected, such that privacy is a human right, and that that your data is not someone else's financial asset, because essentially that's what it is today.
Yeah, and as we're starting to wrap things up, just to summarize everything that we've been talking about in terms of the benefits of Web3 and the benefits of building a metaverse world, we've talked about things like the freedom of choice that this kind of space allows, both from an individual standpoint, but also in terms of what blockchain you're using, where you're storing those assets, where you're like living your life or placing your assets within the digital world, where you're building your life, the freedom to travel to like different digital worlds in a way that you may not necessarily have in regards to transferring those assets, as well as that kind of privacy, security, transparency that Web3 and blockchain technologies allow. Are there any other like big picture
Yeah,
benefits to Web3 that
specifically to Flare, the freedom to transact your NFT in whatever token you want. The freedom to transact is really important to me. And that is one of the great things that Web3 brings you. Less so these days, as we all know that huge amounts of blocks are being censored on Ethereum, such that they are compliant with various things. And that's something that will always have to exist. But at least with what we're trying to achieve in this interoperability game is the freedom to use any blockchain, the freedom to use any asset. And right now, we can give you the freedom to transact an NFT in multiple currencies.
Absolutely. And Rashid, do you have any final advice in regards to how do we build this space even further? How we talk a lot internally about like how we bring new individuals into Metropolis world. What are the key things that you find when you're going out, when you're talking to people, whether they're companies, whether they're individuals or friends, like how do you pitch this to everyone in regards to getting people on board for all of this?
I'm finding that the conversations are really positive around the space, and people are really interested. And we're very early, as Hugo said. There's a lot of work to be done in terms of how this develops. But the exciting thing is we're all here very early, and there's the opportunity to pioneer and really build beautiful experiences. And I'm finding that people want to be part of it. They see the ability for heightened creativity. Brands are extremely interested in how they can activate through the space. And for us at Metropolis, we're very focused on content, the experiences, the commerce, the social elements, and just tying that together with as seamless as possible technology. And what Hugo's building and doing really helps builders like us just not worry too much about the piping, but worry about what's built on that piping, the content, the experiences, and all these different elements that make up these worlds. Really, I'm really excited about the next year, and I think I think we'll be bringing a lot of new partners into the space, big brands that you haven't typically seen enter the space, different partners, and we're just going to keep pushing to innovate and create a very seamless experience that people enjoy.
Yeah, for sure. And that's what all this is about, is creating that seamless experience for everyone, creating those experiences, those worlds, creating a place that is going to interact and affect people's everyday lives in a positive way. because I think we can all agree that we're not necessarily here to replace people's physical lives with a digital equivalent. We're here to enhance people's lives in all respects. And I think that's a pretty good place for us to start wrapping things up. And I want to say a quick thank you to all of our guests who joined us today. Hugo, huge thank you to you. I want to give you a chance if you want to say any final goodbyes, where people can find you, what y'all are up to at Flare, if there's anything that you may want to pitch out or point people towards.
Yeah, absolutely. You can find us at flare.network, at Flare Networks. We have a Discord, we have multiple Telegram channels, and yeah, we have a good doc site. We're hiring relatively rapidly. What else? Yeah, that's it really.
Yeah, thank you so much. Rashid, we're going to
Thank you,
give you
Hugo.
a chance as well.
Yeah, no, thank you everyone for joining. Thank you so much, Hugo. Really, it's always a pleasure, and really excited about what's to come. And we actually have another space later tonight with Walker World, where we'll be talking about how metaverses and virtual worlds. Feel free to join that as well. And thank you, everyone.
Thank you everyone for coming.
Yes, thank you so much, everyone. We're going to start wrapping this up. Just as a final reminder for anyone who's interested, we're also going to be going live again on this